Every time I see Death Stranding, I want to play it again. And now it's on Xbox, and I might just have to play it again.
Wait a second, what do you mean it's on Xbox, Scott Telford?
We represent the majority of social media, realizing that Hideo Kojima and Kojima Productions randomly dropped Death Stranding's Definitive Edition over on Xbox just right now, just available right now. Just one of the biggest reasons to get a PlayStation console just available on Xbox, because why not?
Why not? Mad. It's mad. It's one of those news stories that I was reading it, Scott, because it was like pushed to me via the algorithm on social media. Yes. And initially I just kind of chuckled and went, that's clickbait. You know what I mean?
There's no way that's real.
I thought, there's no way that's real. That's just something trying to get me in, some fake news, as it were. And then I had to Google it like 3 times to double check that this was actually happening, because I feel like this has just come out of nowhere. And to me, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's kind of crazy that, to me, Death Stranding is one of Sony's like big IPs. Yes, it might not sell on the level of a Horizon or a Spider-Man or a God of War or what have you, but like you said, to me it is a reason to get a PlayStation. Death Stranding 2 is one of the only big hitters that they have announced that is seemingly coming next year that we've seen actually a lot of. So for this franchise to suddenly come to Xbox, I just think it takes a feather out of the cap of what PlayStation has to offer this generation, especially at a time when a lot of us are saying, like, where are the PlayStation games?
I think overall as well, it has a bit of a knock on the Hideo Kojima PlayStation Association. Like, obviously Sony swooped in, snatched up Kojima when he left Konami, sort of put the blanket around and brought him in. It's okay, don't worry, we'll let you do whatever you want to do next. And the dude did Death Stranding. But Death Stranding has become this sort of cross-media franchise. Like, they're going to be doing a movie. I mean, we don't know that many details about that, but I did think it was part of Sony Productions. It's actually from A24.
Yeah.
So it's been more third-party adjacent for a little while now anyway. And Hideo Kojima overall has more irons in the fire that are less PlayStation associated. Like, he has a game coming up called OD, I think it's called.
It is.
Which I think started as a Google Stadia project. There was a horror project that was in the works with Kojima and Google Stadia. Obviously, Stadia went completely sideways, and it didn't seem to be the platform that was worth supporting. Xbox then seemed to snatch that up, and that's what OD is. So Kojima is already a bit of a platform-hopping person at the minute anyway, and going forward, we have this project called Fizzant, which I just have to hope is a working title. Like, what are we doing? But Fizzant is another cross-media endeavor where they're going to try and do a game. I think it's a TV show or whatever. Kojima's going to do anything that he can get his hands on.
Yeah.
But my overall point is that for the longest time, it felt like Sony branding and PlayStation branding lent on the Hideo Kojima name, kind of like what they've done with Spider-Man as well, just because they managed to get the rights, obviously, to make the Spider-Man games through Insomniac, and that makes it come across like, oh, Sony's in control of everything Hideo Kojima's doing. Sony's in control of all the Spider-Man properties or whatever it is, and that's not necessarily the case, as is now being seen with Kojima, who does actually own the Death Stranding IP, and is able to just go, I mean, why is there not a Switch version? Like, just put it on everything. You might as well.
No, I would hate to see how that game runs on the Switch, Scott. Maybe the Switch too, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I can only echo what you said. Like, it felt like, you know, at the start of last generation, I suppose, when, you know, in 2015, Hideo Kojima had that fallout with Konami, and then, like you said, PlayStation brought him in this blanket and said, we'll give you as much money as you want as long as you give us something that's an exclusive, right? I guess in hindsight, that was such a savvy move because Kojima Productions has retained the rights to Death Stranding as a franchise. That's going multimedia, and they are working with PlayStation on Fizzant. They've got OD with Xbox, so they can kind of do anything they want. I just think, like, if you're PlayStation now, how gutted are you that you've lost this? Do you really value Death Stranding in the way that the diehard freaks like I do, or is it something that you don't mind going multi-platform, especially when Death Stranding has already gone to PC with its director's cut and, you know, is already on more platforms than just PlayStation? Do you think it's that big of a loss to their overall portfolio?
Well, the thing with Death Stranding is, and we did a video on this back in 2018, the sales of that game were really weird. Like, it's had a really long tail on it, and word of mouth got a lot more people in. But when it first came out, it didn't get to the top of the charts, and it fell off after like 2 or 3 weeks, at least in the UK. And so the general idea was it did really well. It's Hideo Kojima. Of course it did really, really well. And overall, it is obviously a reputable product, and the sales did get there over time. But it's not like Sony really seemed to double down on it too much in regards to saying, make sure you get a PlayStation 5 to play the definitive edition of something like a Death Stranding, even though in certain press materials, you'll see Norman Reedus and you'll see Death Stranding memorabilia pop up over there. But I just wonder, like, it's not as much of a sales juggernaut as, like, you know, Spider-Man 2 or whatever. It is kind of a for the sickos type game, and we are two sickos right here for that thing. But at the same time, yeah, like, I think it's kind of over to, like, the audience, the brand perception. A lot of people, you know, a lot of people associate Death Stranding with PlayStation. I think at the minute they do, but I think Hideo Kojima on the long form of the whole thing wants to break away from that stuff.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And be known as a wider auteur. I think Kojima's ultimate endpoint, I think, is to direct a movie or to, you know, direct like something that isn't a video game. Like, dude got into games because he couldn't get into movies back when he was growing up, and so I think he wants to round that whole thing back around again. Something like a Death Stranding, the way that it's set up, doesn't feel like it would ever get up there with a Spidey or whatever anyway. Like, it's too quirky and weird. And like, you look at the trophy completion percentages, not that many people got through the story anyway.
Yeah.
It's very easy to drop off that game.
I think it is going to be interesting with the second one because, like the original, nobody knew what it was, and that was to its benefit in the lead up. Like all of those mysterious trailers that had us frothing at the mouth trying to figure out what this story was going to be, how was the game going to play. And then when the game came out and it wasn't combat heavy at all, didn't have the stylings of a Metal Gear, was pretty much just about you trying to deliver parcels all around the globe. Understandably, not to everyone's tastes, but now we kind of know what Death Stranding is as a franchise, so I'm going to be really interested to see how Death Stranding 2 does with that knowledge, without the massive hype of this is Hideo Kojima's next thing after Metal Gear, but this is another Death Stranding. I can only hope that in the years since it launched, that word of mouth has been kind to it, that sickos like you and I who have been shouting it out for this long has caught on, and that people have given it a try, maybe the director's cut on PC or maybe at a discount with the original version, and kind of come to embrace it in a way. But it's going to be interesting going into the end of the year. One, if Sony does a kind of conference and has Death Stranding there, like how are they going to manage that marketing? When will Death Stranding 2 come to Xbox down the line? Will it be as long of a wait? Is that in the contract, or will we see a more rapid turnaround with the sequel? Probably not, but I mean, if you told me yesterday that the original was going to come to Xbox today, I would have said probably not to that as well, you know?
There's also that ongoing conversation about massive titles making their way to Xbox and then getting on Game Pass, whether or not they go exclusive or not, because it works both ways. Like, we have Indiana Jones coming out on the Xbox in December, but that's going to be on PlayStation at the beginning of next year, so I assume that a lot of people are going to hang on and just wait for the PlayStation version, given the amount of PlayStation sales that there are. But then you have the flip side where you've got something like Call of Duty going over to, you know, it's on Xbox, but it's on Game Pass, so then that's more tantalizing. It always has to come down to the individual studio. Like, clearly Kojima Productions see something in just making Death Stranding available. Maybe it was contractual, maybe Sony had the first few years locked down. Death Stranding 1 is like 6 years old now, which is kind of crazy, but 5 years old. So maybe that contract got to a point where it's just worth putting it on there and then doing Death Stranding 2. But the multi-platform stuff I think is interesting. Like, you get all these conversations about, you know, the death of the console wars, like whether it's worth having something be exclusive. Someone like Square Enix realizing that it's not worth having Final Fantasy VII, the trilogy, exclusive to PlayStation or whatever it is, and Kojima entering that conversation and having Death Stranding be the thing that tests the waters.
Yeah,
like,
man.
How much does that turn heads on Xbox? Like, maybe.
We are entering the era of just these third-party releases, aren't we? And I don't imagine, you know, something like Spider-Man 3 or God of War 3 is going to come to Xbox anytime soon. I think Sony will hold out until the very last minute, because we know how much they do not like sharing their things. They didn't even like crossplay for the longest time until they couldn't ignore it anymore. But with, like you said, with Xbox opening up that playground and seemingly reaping the rewards by doing it. You know, we were just looking at the Black Ops 6 sales, I think, in the podcast the other day.
Yes.
Or something, we don't know, we talked too much.
It'll be on the
we
channel.
Talk too much, it'll be somewhere. And how well that is selling, or at least how many players it has reached because it is now on Game Pass. I think it was something crazy like, oh man, it was the vast majority of people with an Xbox like were playing Call of Duty, but that didn't seem to impact the sales on the PlayStation side, because 1/3 of players who owned a PlayStation 5 were playing Call of Duty as well. So it's like, this multi-platform approach seems to be working for Microsoft, at least in the short term, and I wonder if the big wigs at Sony kind of are looking at that thinking, well, what's the harm in releasing a second-party game, or writing that into the contract and trying to get some money that way, even if we have funded something. You know, they have done that with MLB, so maybe if they extend that out to some of their other projects, is this going to be the norm going forward? I don't know, but it's interesting.